Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body as well as members of the public may access this meeting via virtual means. Participants may access this meeting through the remote meeting link as posted on the meeting agenda and through the town's online calendar. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by raising their hand or otherwise signaling their intent to speak. This meeting will be recorded. Please take care to mute your microphone unless you have been recognized by the chair. We will now confirm attendance of members. Please respond with present if you're on this call. Elise Mayalowski.
Present.
Thanks. Lucia Lopez.
Present.
Great. Matthew Ronca.
Present.
Michael King. Parker Happ.
Mike's on mute, but present.
Jane Moran.
Present.
Karen Wills.
Present.
Vikasath Prati.
Present.
Rob Benson is obviously present. And now staff. John Gelsich.
Present.
Great. And Lori St. John.
I think Lori is not making this meeting tonight.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. Bear with me 1 second. All right, I'm going to jump into just our agenda. First thing on our agenda is administrative items. And so we need to appoint members to zoning advisory committee and to design review board. So these are two kind of subcommittees, subboards of the planning board. And so that's our role here. So for zoning advisory committee, there's 3 open at-large seats and 2 open associate seats. So if I'm understanding this correctly, associate seats don't vote in the zoning advisory committee meetings, but they can attend the meetings and contribute. So we have 3 applicants, and we ideally will have a planning board representative on the zoning advisory committee. John, are we looking for 3 of the 4, or are we looking for 4 of the 4 with 1 being an associate member?
So we're looking at, so the 3 applicants that are named are for the open seats. The planning board rep is a separate seat that the planning board just needs to nominate every year. So I think it was Vic holding that seat up until now. And so we would need to do that separately. And then the 3 open seats and the 2 associate seats.
All right, so we have three applicants for 3 open seats. Are they Stephen Conti, Sravana Krishna, Sudeep Maiti on the call?
Steve Conti here.
Great. If you're on the call, would you mind just saying your interest in the zoning advisory committee, and so the planning board could hear?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I am interested in the open standing seat for the advisory committee. I am, yes.
Does anyone on the planning board have any questions for Stephen?
Yes, actually I do. Sorry, Robert. This is Karen.
Go ahead, Karen.
Just why? So yes, you're interested. Why the interest in this committee?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Karen. So I've been a resident of the town for almost 30 years now. Raised 3 children here. Had a pretty busy professional life. I am still working. Because of the nature of my job leading up to recently, I really haven't had much time except for support of the school system and some of the projects there. So, there's been a lot of activity in the last few years, sort of been standing by, watching things. And I have a vast experience, almost 45 years of experience in design and construction engineering. And I thought this is a good time where, when I have time, that I could bring, some insight and help, to some of the things that are going on in town and so forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have the other two applicants for Ravana? I can't, I'm not seeing all. Sravana or Sudeep on the call? I don't see either one of them. The reality is we have 3 open seats and 3 applicants. I think it's in our best interest that we, I think I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint Stephen Conti, Sravana Krishna, and Sudeep Malti to the Zoning Advisory Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. I'm gonna go through just the roll call vote. Elise Mayalowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Hap.
I abstain.
Okay, Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati.
I would abstain.
Okay, and Rob Benson is yes. All right, great. Now we need to decide who is going to be our planning board representative to the zoning advisory committee. This past year has been Vikasath. Are you still interested?
Yes. If
Okay. Is there anyone else that's interested in kind of throwing their hat in the ring to be considered for the zoning advisory committee position? All right, hearing none, I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint Vikasath Prati to the zoning advisory committee as our planning board representative.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks. Roll call vote. Elise Mayalowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Hap,
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath.
I'm voting for myself, yes.
Excellent. And Rob Benson is a yes. Congratulations, Vikasath. I know you have been doing a great job and will continue.
Thank you.
All right, on to design review board. So design review board is a little bit different because we have like there's the slots on the design review board, and people have to have certain qualifications depending on what slot they are occupy. And some people could occupy more than one slot. So we want to appropriately get the right people to the right position that are interested. So right now, the agenda I'm looking at is this. This has 6 people listed, but we got a 7th applicant today.
So through the chair, yeah, we didn't get it today. We got it Friday after the agenda had been posted and all the meeting materials have been sent out. So it's Jeff Doherty, who is currently on the design review board, reapplied. And then just while I've got the attention of the board, I sent out 2 statements from applicants. I want to make sure everyone received those. Otherwise, I can read them aloud. Everyone get those?
I got them. Yeah.
From Jeanette Thompson and
Mhm.
Sora
I got them.
Farnese.
I got them.
Zahavia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for sending, John.
So Rob, you would consider all of these named people and then also Jeff Doherty.
Okay. I'm trying to think about how the best way to go about this.
To the chair, may I?
Sure, go ahead, Vikasath. Any recommendations are helpful here.
Now, I just want to understand because I know that for the zoning advisory committee, a couple of applicants didn't turn up, or what are the reason? But can we confirm are the rest of them for the design review board are available on the call right now? I believe.
Well, that's a good question. I see Curtis. Sohab. If I pronounce any of names incorrectly, I apologize in advance.
I believe Sarab is out also. That's what his notes says here.
He was on a flight.
Right.
Sudeep applied for both positions, zoning advisory committee and design review board. Sue Ellen Stoddard.
She's on, I think.
Oh, okay. I think I see her. Jeanette Thompson.
She also sent a statement that she wouldn't be able to attend. She sent a statement though.
Okay. All right, let's how does anyone have any recommendations about how to go about this? So we've got 7 applicants, 7 positions, but the big thing is 2 of them are open alternate seats, which are kind of non-voting seats. They'd be members of the board, but they're not considered in voting for decisions.
So through the chair,
Yep.
the associate and the alternate seats they can vote when there's not a quorum of the regular members. So they
Okay.
basically fill in if there's not enough, or if there's not enough regular members. If one of the 5 are not present, the alternate can vote. But I think what Vic may have been alluding to is maybe get the people who are here get their statements and get them to express their interest in joining the board.
Curtis, would you like to go? You've been on the design review board. Would you like to go over kind of? I know you've been on Zach for a while, so I know some of your background. But for the rest of the board, would you like to go over your interest in design review board and maybe a little bit about your professional experience? I think that's relevant.
Okay, I'm a consulting civil engineer, been doing land development for, I guess, 35 or 36 years now. Wanted to help out the community where I could, seen a lot of different things. Wanted to, like I say, been doing this a long time, figured I could help out wherever I could. And because I started with Zach, I think last year I wound up on the design review board and have enjoyed that. So I would like to continue.
Thanks, Curtis. Sue Ellen, would you like to give a little bit about why you're interested in your background and your prior experience on the design review board?
I've been on the design review board since its conception. I own a design firm here in town, and I've been very concerned about being able to give back to the community, for the community that's given me work over the years. My background is in interior design and architecture, and I taught at RISD School of Design and Becker College for 40 years. So now that I'm no longer doing that, this gives me an opportunity to spend more time with this.
Thanks, Sue Ellen. How does the board want to proceed? I think we have 4 incumbents that have been very strong members of the design review board. We have 3 new applicants. How does any recommendations?
Rob, through the chair.
Yep.
Would it help to understand who's eligible for which of the slot, as you put it? In particular, do we have anybody from the Historic District Commission that applied?
I don't believe so.
Jeanette's not on that, John?
Let me take a look. I don't believe so, but I'll take a look. No, nobody that's applied is on the Hopkinton Historic District Commission.
So,
Through the chair.
go ahead, Jane.
I think where Sudeep just got appointed to the zoning,
Yep.
Zach, it could be that he might not mind if we didn't have enough room for him on the design review board.
I was thinking that too. He might be fine to be considered a alternate.
Yeah. Then I think the only other thing you have to think about is of the two remaining, Shavana and Sohab, who would be the alternate and who would,
Through the chair,
and through.
Ravana Krishna also got appointed to the design review board.
We got to point to Zach, you mean?
Yes,
yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
to Zach.
You're right. I just noticed.
All right. I think
Well, it was a good idea.
I think because of that, I think Sravana and Sudeep, because they're both not on the call, they just got appointed to Zach. I think if we can, with the 5 other applicants, if we can assign those to the 5 positions of need, I think it's reasonable to make Sravana and Sudeep the alternates.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to go through this. So, it sounds like Sue Ellen could be in the art of design professions.
So I believe both Sue Ellen and Jeanette are eligible for the fine art or landscape design. And there's
Do
also
we
the
think Curtis, being a civil engineer, could be also number 2? The training experience in fine arts or landscape design?
Rob,
Yeah.
Through the chair, probably a question for John. What qualifies as experience in the art of design professions? That's engineering design there, or is that?
So it's usually landscape architecture, interior design,
Okay.
yeah, architecture. So I think, just to inform the board, I believe and in my office, and I should have printed it out and brought it with me. I believe Jeanette was one person qualified by training experience in the art of design professions. Sue Ellen was number 2 in the fine arts or landscape design. I believe Jeff may have been one person doing business in town or citizen at large, since he owns Angels. And then I believe Curtis was a designee of the planning board, and then the planning board chair or their designee was vacant.
So if I'm looking at the agenda here, so Jeanette could fill slot 1. Or wait, that could be Stephen. Stephen could be slot 1. Stephen Conti.
You're looking at the wrong list of names, I think. Sohab, I think was who we were looking at.
Oh yes. Sohab could be position 1. Jeanette can be position 2.
Jeanette's an architect, not a landscape architect.
Okay, so Sue Ellen could be position 2. Jeff Doherty, position 3. Curtis, position 4, and Jeanette Thompson, position 5. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds right.
All right, I'd like to entertain him. Can I just use first names here, or do I? Let me try to go through the full names. I'd like to entertain a motion to select Sohab Faramarzi to seat 1, Sue Ellen Stoddard to seat 2, Jeff Doherty to seat 3, Curtis Smithson to seat 4. What's Steven's last name again?
Even applied for Zach, not DRB.
Oh, to Curtis to seat 4, Jeanette Thompson to seat 5, and then Sarvana Krishna to the alternate, and Sudeep Malti to the alternate positions.
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody. Roll
Was-
call vote. Oh, go ahead. Any discussion?
No, I just had a question. Which position was Jeffrey Doherty?
Person doing business in the town or citizen at large.
Okay.
All right, roll call vote. Elise Mayalowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Hap.
I abstain.
Okay, Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes. Thanks. It's not always straightforward when you have to match them up to their kind of their resumes. Thank you, everybody, for your service on the design review board. All right, we're moving on to approval not required for 69 Franklin Road, Agilitas Energy. Is there a representative for Agilitas, if I'm saying that correctly, Energy on the call?
Yes, we have representatives from Agilitas Energy. This is Mustafa Sezgin, Senior Project Development Manager, and my colleague Matt Accardi is here. He is the project developer for Agilitas Energy.
Okay. Did you say you had a presentation?
We don't have a presentation.
Okay. John, could you just give us some background of what the applicant is looking to do?
All right, sorry, I didn't know I was muted. All right, so here's the A&R plan. So this is probably familiar to some of you. This is the solar array over on Franklin Road. This is the old Liberty Mutual building over here. This has already been sectioned off, so that's not part of this. So the applicant has finished the installation of the solar array, and now they're looking to comply with the other requirements of the special permit, which is to essentially convey this open space to a nonprofit, which is what they had said they were going to do initially. So they're looking to do that now, and they are sectioning off the area with the array as one lot. So that's lot 1A. And then lot 1B is the remainder, and that's all this around here. So the A&R is just to break it up into 2 different lots, and it meets the lot area requirement and the frontage requirement, so it appears to warrant endorsement from the planning board.
Thanks, John. So the the land they're looking to donate to a nonprofit doesn't completely surround the solar array. The solar array land does connect to the old Liberty Mutual building parcel, along, they have a shared boundary for some part of it, correct?
So right here is where the solar parcel would access Franklin Road. So this is all open space down here.
Okay.
And then the open space comes up. It's a little narrow here. Around. So all of this is the open space. All this includes the pond. And this is all a separate lot that's already been subdivided. So this is not part of it. And then comes into here and gets that.
Okay. Are there any other questions from anyone on the board? All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to endorse the A&R plan for 69 Franklin Road.
So moved.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Elise Malowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Happ,
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes.
Sorry, Rob, I missed the motion in the second. Who made those?
Matthew made the motion. I think Parker made the second.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 1C, Wilson Street Road damage discussion. Do we have Peter Bemis or
So,
Vin
yeah, so I
on?
have an update for the board on that one.
Thank you.
Beta talked to Peter Bemis and Vin last week. There's still some work that needs to be done, so they had a conversation on Friday. Peter and Phil are going to work together to try and figure out the resolution to all of Beta's comments, and then they intend on presenting a resolution at the next planning board meeting on the 23rd. So they are
Okay.
not going to discuss tonight.
Good. I hope the next time we discuss it is the final time we discuss it. So I'm glad they're trying to work offline to get to a resolution. All right, minutes of August 19th, 2024. Anyone have any comments or
Those are-
adjustments they'd like?
Sorry, Rob, those are
Are
still being edited, so those will be on the next meeting agenda.
Okay. All right, we're on to item 2, continued public hearing, 147 Hayden Road, Charleswood Elementary School. Major project site plan and stormwater management permit, Town of Hopkinton Public Schools. So where we were last time is there was it was still under review from our peer review consultant, if my memory serves me correctly.
And that's still the case. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. You can take over.
I'm happy to. So when we last spoke, we were still waiting on peer review comments, I think, for traffic, and we had just recently received, or we received right after the meeting, we received the stormwater comments. So the board should have had those available to them for the last few weeks. At this point, we've reviewed those comments, but with the delay in receiving them, we didn't have time to formally submit with enough advance time that we could do a formal review, get a clean letter. And so we discussed it with John, and we thought that it made the most sense for us to appear before you tonight and share some of our responses to those comments and some of the adaptations that we're adding to the design from both the stormwater perspective and also to respond to some of the traffic comments and solicit any feedback that the board might have on the responses or our intended responses, and then formally submit it in hopes of accelerating the process. The one part of the process that has not occurred, and I'm not really sure where it sits, is the design review board. I don't believe that they have met, unless I missed it, John. And so I wasn't sure where design review board fits in the process at this point in time.
Yeah, so through the chair, they had not met about this. We were waiting until the new board got seated. So now we can have a new meeting since we have new board members.
So our goal would be to solicit your feedback tonight. We have Semiotis with us to present, along with Traverse. And then we also have Vinod Kilakari from VHB to present on traffic and address any of the questions that are in the peer review. I'm not sure if Tyne Bond are with us today. No? Okay.
Yeah, this is Chris Brocas from Tyne Bond. I did the stormwater peer review, but did not do anything with the traffic. That was another person at the firm. Yep.
So with that, I'd turn it over to, I think, Michelle, you're going to walk us through how you're responding to some of these comments.
Yes, thank you. So actually, let me share my screen. Is it possible to have the right to share my screen?
Hey, John will give you that permission.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be all set now.
Okay. So let me share. Great. So this is just the review memo, and the first section is some of the zoning comments. And actually, Chris, I might to turn it back to you if you want to address.
Yep. So regarding the height, and I don't know if it's been submitted because we're going to include it with our formal response, but we did meet with the Board of Appeals in the fall of, I believe, last year, or it might have even been a year and a half ago now. And they did come to a finding that the Dover Amendment applied to the height of the building based on these circumstances, which should, we'll include the minutes of that meeting in our formal response, but that should address item number 1. Item number 2 and item number 4 were also addressed by the Dover Amendment letter that should be in your packet on this, that was sent by the zoning enforcement officer in town. We do still plan to do what we can to address the number of parking spaces, and that'll be part of our formal response, because we heard the committee and we feel that some additional parking spaces are necessary. And I think, Ashley, we did end up changing to the parallel parking spaces to make them 22 feet long. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Yes.
So go ahead.
And we are still working towards increasing our landscaping and parking lots too, as we were pretty close before. So that's something we're working towards as well.
And I think that covers all 4 of these items.
Thank you. And so now let me bring up the site plan. So for the stormwater comments, so in the general layout we presented last time that we shifted the road up, the rotary came up, and we added these 2 additional parking. So vehicular. So we presented that we added these 2, we shifted and reduced this parking area, the gravel overlot, and we created a paved parking here per the comment. And then as part of conservation comments, we shifted the road so that we would stay out of their buffers. And so it's balanced between the 2 wetlands here, but the same general layout here. So for going through and addressing the stormwater comments, the stormwater systems are really unchanging. We've added additional biofiltration units to be able to address some of the phosphorus. So that's just underground structures that we've added in a few locations in where the stormwater is being retained but not infiltrated. And then to address so some of the comments were about the velocity of the water. So to make sure that we've reduced the velocities as well. So to really prevent scouring and to make sure that we're protecting the neighbors, we added a filling basin. So it's a shallow basin with some riprap. And it just allows the water that overflows from the larger basin to kind of slowly kind of release into the woods. And so there's riprap to kind of help with that. So in terms of stormwater design, those are really the major changes in the design from the peer review comments. And we met with DPW, and so we reduced, previously we had 2 water lines tapping off the main, and we have now combined that into one. So now that one water line still follows the same path, and it loops around the building and it goes into our fire pump here. And then, so part of those changes were marking out where we have snow storage. So there's snow storage in the plans that we will be submitting. The snow storage will be marked out and flagged on the site, and those are out of the stormwater BMP area. So any stormwater BMPs like the rain garden or the bioretention basin or the swales, snow storage would not be allowed, and then it would not be in the wetland buffers. So those areas would be flagged throughout the site. And then there was some layout changes in terms of making sure that where we have all the curb cuts that they're ADA accessible. And then there were some planting changes for screening. And so Ashley, if you're on the call and you want to kind of
absolutely. Thanks,
discuss-
Michelle.
Yep.
Do you mind zooming in just a little bit? I hope everyone doesn't mind, but I just marked up this plan so that you could see in red exactly the comments we looked at, reviewed, and are starting to incorporate into the plans. And I'll also note we've been getting great feedback from conservation as well as the butters. So you're starting to see all of these comments filling in some of these blanks. So up at the top, I think we had some great feedback where we are closest to the property line. You'll see that north parking lot. About what we were doing there previously, it was just a restoration mix, but we are trying to add increased buffer there. So now you'll see a very dense buffer planting combination, evergreen trees, some shade trees, as well as an understory planting. So I think that's a really big benefit and positive change. Similarly, to the south of the site, you'll notice along the parent loop, we have also added additional buffer plantings, which will be located along the slope. And again, that's just reinforcing the existing vegetation there and creating a denser buffer for any of those abutters. The south side's not as close as the north, but still a great benefit. Snow removal was noted as a comment. So we have started to locate snow removal areas within the parking lots on the plans. And then also trash enclosure was just another comments and feedback. So we've located that and just marked that clearly off on the service area that any sort of dumpster will be covered with an 8-foot trash enclosure. As Michelle noted, just trying to clean up some of our circulation. The bus loop around the rear of the school will be closed during the daytime. However, we have still added ADA tip downs and crossings into that play area too, to make sure that's fully ADA compliant. And then, as I mentioned previously, we were really close in some of those initial studies and getting the 10%. So we're still working towards that and beefing up some of the parking lot planting to get some more shade in those parking areas and hopefully meet that 10% requirement. There was another comment in question about if our bus loops were it's okay, you can stand this one, accommodating enough length for those buses so that they would not spill off into adjacent drives. The bus loop has been sized to accommodate 19 buses, which is actually more than currently planned for. So it's slightly oversized, which we think is a positive and also going to help alleviate any sort of concerns with overflow into drive lanes. And then Michelle, if you just skip to the next plan, I think the biggest change, and I think one of the most positive changes, was based on some conservation comments, again, realigning the roadway to stay out of that buffer zone, which was a major adjustment, but I think a positive one. And then at the entry or the secondary entrance from Hayden Row, we've also received some comments from abutters. So looking at increasing that buffer area on both sides of that entry drive, which has been another benefit to the plan. And then again, noting snow stockpile areas across. And then finally, as Michelle mentioned, we have heard loud and clear the need for some more parking, specifically maybe more paved parking spaces. So you'll note that the overflow parking area has gotten slightly smaller, but we have incorporated additional parking spaces closer to the school, which we think will be much more functional for everybody and useful. Is there any questions I can answer in terms of landscape?
So, and then if there isn't, so some of the comments from the peer reviewer and when we spoke that we have asked to be conditions of the approval is a sequencing plan for the construction. So as part of the set, we did submit a general erosion and controls plan and a site prep plan, and this just shows the overall site. And we do not intend or want that the entire site be clear cut and loam stripped because we do understand it's a large site and to be able to control the site would be challenging. However, the contractor is not on board as part of, unlike some of other projects where they come on early. So we are asking that as part of the condition of approval, that the sequencing of the work be submitted prior to the start of construction, but when the contractor comes on board, as part of the comments or response to the comments, we will be submitting a draft SWIP, so the soil erosion plan would be submitted as a draft, and then once we get the additional information of contractor contact information and start dates, that would be then finalized, and it would be submitted to the EPA and then submitted to the town the 2 weeks prior to the start of construction. And then another item that we're asking to be conditional of the approval is the infiltrameter testing on site.
Through the chair, I'm sorry. I just
go ahead, Parker.
Could you clarify that last point about the sequence of the contractor requesting for what they want to not have to agree that they're not going to clear cut? You just lost me a little bit there. If you could just go through that point again.
I'll take that one, Michelle.
Okay.
So this is a publicly bid job, so we can include within the design documents what we request that the contractor do, whether it be provide a dewatering plan that addresses how they're going to deal with water on the site, or provide a site clearing plan for approval as part of the onset of construction. But we will be required by law through a public project to award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder. through a public bidding process. So we are somewhat tied to the winning bidder's approach to how they will address the site. It can be conditioned, as all things can be conditioned, similar to how they'll have to go before the or through the Conservation Commission agent to get approval of their erosion control as they start. But where we don't have the flexibility that a private developer has, who can select their contractor at any point in order to do this. At Hopkins, we had the opportunity to bring the contractor on in advance and develop their approach to the site with them, but that is not how the town has elected to bid this project.
Okay, that's crystal clear. Thank you.
All right. And then the other item that we're asking to be part of a conditional approval is the infiltrometer testing. That was part of the comment. So we did do the deep test pits to classify the soils and to see where the high groundwater elevation is. So we're showing that, and that was part of the previous submission and how we've designed the systems to keep that 2 feet of separation. And when we were modeling the recharge, we're using a very conservative rate. But part of the peer review comments is to do infiltrometer testing to verify the rates. And if we used a rate that is equivalent to the soils just based on soil classifications, it is a much higher rate, and we weren't using that. We were using a much lower rate. So we are in the process of scheduling the infiltrometer testing. However, we are requesting that it be a conditional approval item as part of this process.
We aren't sure that we're going to be able to get that scheduled within the next 6 to 8 weeks. So that's part of the reason for the ask there. We have to seek a proposal for someone to perform the testing, as well as get access out to the site for what I think is the 4th time to do additional investigation. And so because that will take some time to set up, we were requesting that the board allow us to make that a condition of approval and not a completed and a submitted thing. We did a similar thing at Hopkins with the board as well, as it relates to test pits for the infiltration system. And that was successful on that project as well.
So I have a question. Can we, in terms of, I know I've seen this plan or with maybe some modifications several times. Can we talk about the queuing of buses versus the queuing of cars that pick up and drop off again? So the buses are going to come on around the front of the school.
So,
I guess I would call it the front.
Rob, if I could, we have Vinod here from VHB to talk about traffic.
Okay, well, hold it. I'll hold
so
my
if you'd like to
questions
hold
then.
that for a second, and we can talk about traffic all in one instance and sort of
Perfect.
wrap up stormwater if that's all right with the board.
Yeah, it's all right with me.
So that is just running through kind of the general plans. And then, so I don't know if there's any specific questions that relate to stormwater or soil erosion or utilities. If not, then we can just jump right into traffic.
Or if there's any observations from the site walk that you all had with Chris Kenny a couple of weeks back.
I think you covered this, but it's gonna once the developer is chosen, there's gonna be some review by Conservation Commission, because I think there's some concern with a large area like this, the transition from basically what it is now, a wooded environment, to basically being a construction site to actually a built out project. What happens with the water in between? Like being a finalized project versus woods and then the construction site, but you're going to go through Conservation Commission to again for that transition period. I didn't fully understand.
No, so as part of, we're going to present the same stormwater presentation to Conservation Commission tomorrow. As part of the startup of the project, Conservation Commission typically will include a site walk at the beginning of construction with the agent. What we have sort of discussed as an approach amongst the team is the idea of prior to mobilization or prior to allowing mobilization as a condition of the plans and specifications, we would require them to submit and have approval of a dewatering plan for the site. Dewatering is design build by the contractor, so we can give them parameters that they need to follow. But they ultimately bid based on how they plan to approach the task of dewatering the site. We don't tell them explicitly how to do that. It's a design build, for lack of a better term, of the contractor. And so the thought is that we could include as a condition of the plans and specifications certain items that they'll need to submit and receive approval of as part of the ramp up into the project. And then it's on the contractor to submit something that they feel will be accepted, have it accepted, and that would allow them to begin their mobilization on site. And it would be something that they would be held to in terms of, are they meeting their requirements under the contract?
Okay. All right.
We game planned a couple of different ways to do it, and that's the one that sort of kept rising to the top.
Okay. It's that seems to make sense to me. So I'm happy with that. Any other questions from the board? Someone was starting to make a comment. Who was that?
Oh, that was Michelle from Semiotis. And so as part of the site preparation plan, we do show areas called out for temporary dewatering basins and for sedimentation basins. And we do size out the areas based off of the CGP and the SWIP, based on how they recommend to size it for volume. So we do call out those areas throughout the plan, so the contractor is aware that they are, significantly sized areas that would need to be used and to have swales to be able to direct the water there. So we are in development looking at the grades on the site on being able to place them while accommodating that, there's not a basin in the middle where the building would be going. So we are looking at the existing and proposed topography to be able to place them throughout the site in numerous areas, because we do understand that it, as they move through the site, they're going to be needed and they will be shifting kind of through construction.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop sharing, and Vinod, you can take control.
Thank you, Michelle. This is Vinod Kalikiri with VHB. I'm a senior transportation planner and the traffic engineer of record for this project. So what I was hoping to do today, as Chris mentioned early on during the meeting, we haven't fully wrapped up our responses to comments on the peer review yet, including the traffic peer review comments. We are close to finishing them, and we should be submitting them to the town in the near future. But what I wanted to do today is touch upon some of the main themes that we have outlined through the peer review process. It was a very thorough and extensive review of the traffic study that was included in the filing. We have, again, the tie and bond comment letter. It's very technical as opposed to the site plan comments where you have a graphic to see and can understand what's happening with drainage or landscaping. Traffic peer review comments are I would say very technical in terms of like the methodology, the assumptions that went into some of the analysis that we presented in the study, and some of the findings and the results that came out of that analysis. So just briefly, if I were to categorize or group all of the comments that we received from Ty and Bond into different categories, I'd say there are 4 main categories of comments that we received. The first set of comments are primarily requests for clarification. So these are things like, how did we do the seasonal adjustment of data, right? How did we account for traffic variations during the course of the year? How did we account for traffic growth in the future? What analysis years were used and why were those specific years chosen? There were questions related to whether or not the queues that would form at the new traffic signal at the Marathon Driveway, whether that would impact adjacent intersections in that area. And there were questions about clarifications for, whether the 2 schools, Marathon School and Charleswood School, whether they would operate during the same times or same hours of operation, or if there would be an offset in their operations. There are a whole series of clarification requests of that form, which we are going to go through and provide detailed responses with all the backup for each of those. Then the second category of comments that we received was where they asked for additional information. So this is where they reviewed the data presented in the traffic study and asked for more information. And this has to do with the crash rate. So there was a crash analysis that we included, which is a part of a typical traffic study. We look at crash data over the past 5 years and kind of provide an analysis of any patterns or any recurring themes of how crashes are happening along this corridor. So we provided that analysis. There's 1 year of data that we had skipped in the analysis. It was 2020, which was a year where the data was, as you may recall, was significantly affected by COVID conditions with the travel restrictions. So the data we felt was not usable for that reason, but we analyzed everything else that was available. But at the peer reviewers' request, we included the 2020 data. They wanted us to include that information in the analysis and the crash analysis, even though it was an atypical condition. We still included that. They asked for a traffic signal warrant analysis. This is a justification for a traffic signal control. So there are federal standards that define when an intersection can be signalized. Obviously, we did run the analysis. We included a summary of the analysis, but the appendix backup worksheets were missing. So they asked for that analysis worksheets, and we are going to be including that as part of our response. So, and then there was a question about, whether it would make sense or whether it'd be helpful to look at police department crash records. The data typically required for a traffic study is obtained from Mass DOT, which is RMV data, the crash data. And that peer reviewer asked if we should be reviewing police department crash records as well. And I'll touch upon that and a few other items at the end. But one of the things that we are including in our response is that similar to any other project like this, there will be a requirement for a post-construction monitoring review of projects like this, where the study itself is prepared based on a lot of technical assumptions and methodology that are all tied to national standards and Mass DOT guidelines. But there's always a need to come back after the site is up and running, the school is occupied, to come back and look at traffic volumes, traffic patterns, and see if we need to tweak anything as we go through that process. So there are a few things that we are requesting that some of these comments be tied to that post-construction monitoring, and I'll touch upon those. One of those being this looking at actual crash data from the police department, in addition to looking at data from Mass DOT. Then there were a series of comments that relate to suggestions or recommendations that the peer reviewer had. And again, this included things like, that the crash data should be monitored in the future compared to how the crash data looks now without the new school. They recommended that queues be monitored in the future to compare to queues under the current conditions that we observed. They suggested that crossing guard locations should be maintained in the future. They suggested that future needs for changes in traffic control at other locations along the corridor. For example, at the high school driveways or the middle school driveway, they asked, that those should be taken into consideration as part of the future planning for this area. They suggested that the design for the new traffic signal adhere to Mass DOT standards, which it will be. One of their comments was a suggestion to consider alternate intersection control rather than putting in a new traffic signal at the intersection of the Marathon Driveway and Hayden Road Street. They asked if other alternate solutions like a roundabout should be considered, or has that been considered for that location? And a response would be that that intersection, that area is severely constrained in terms of environmental considerations and right-of-way impacts. So we looked at various constraints, I guess, and came up with a solution that works best for that, for the conditions that we're dealing with. So we'll have a response to that effect saying that the most appropriate solution for that intersection is a traffic signal control and not something like a roundabout. They had recommended that school zones and speed limit designations along the corridor be reviewed, and we did acknowledge that in the traffic study that should be done. But with the changes that are being planned, both in terms of the roadway traffic control as well as the new school and the future traffic patterns, that's again one more area that should be tied to a post-construction monitoring study as opposed to looking at speed zones and school zone designations under current conditions, because the current conditions are what they are. And the goal would be to see if we can use some of the improvements and some of the solutions that we're implementing along the corridor can help change some of those metrics, the speeds and traffic patterns, so that we can come up with a solution that works for the future condition, not for what's out there today. There was a comment about lane widths. We are working both with DPW and engineering on the lane widths along Hayden Road Street and what makes sense, both from a capacity point of view in terms of being able to process the amount of traffic that we estimate for the corridor, but also from a traffic calming perspective. I mean, the intent is not to create a wide roadway with too many lanes and wide shoulders and lanes that are too wide than they need to be, because that'll again promote higher speeds for the corridor during off-peak conditions. So it's kind of a delicate balance between capacity needs and traffic calming needs on what the appropriate cross-section for the roadway should be. So we are working again with DPW and engineering as well as with Ty & Bond to make sure that the design that we are proposing, which is essentially 10-foot lanes with 4-foot shoulders, is an appropriate solution for the corridor. So that will continue to work with that comment with engineering and DPW as we go through the process. And then the final set of category of comments we got from the peer review was related to the site plan, and those are site plan related traffic comments. One of the comments they had was about whether there should be a raised island on the new driveway that's being proposed for Charleswood School. And our recommendation position is that island should not be put in at this stage. The intent is not to actually physically create an obstruction, but rather use wayfinding and parent instructions to make sure that they use the correct driveway when they're coming out of the site, and not to put in physical obstructions that would limit the potential to be flexible in the future. There were some comments about straightening out a crosswalk on the site. We are taking care of that. They had recommended that we consider including the flashing beacons, rectangular rapid flashing beacons across the new driveway, in addition to across Hayden Road Street. But since there is no sidewalk on the east side of Hayden Road Street, a flashing beacon across the new Charleswood School driveway does not make sense. There's no sidewalk to control with that RFP, and so we would clarify that. And then the last comment I would say that they had on the traffic studies related to what the chair was talking about, was asked about, which is the bus circulation and the parent circulation around the site. And I do have a couple of graphics that we're working on that I can share. Let me just see.
while you're doing that, Vinod, one of the things that Vinod didn't mention, but is definitely a concern for the ESBC is the impact of this traffic on the neighbors. And so one of the reasons that we're trying to strike a delicate balance with the lane width on Hayden Row is to ensure that we don't take more of the right of way than is necessary to meet the requirements of the project. It's always a balance between safety, not affecting your neighbors, and the sort of design intent. So we're trying to strike that balance as best we can, and that's part of those ongoing discussions with the DPW about what should be built in those locations.
Thank you, Chris. So are you able to see the site layout on the screen?
We have the list of peer review responses.
Oh, okay. Sorry. All right. Let me know if you can see it now.
Correct.
Oh.
There we go.
Thank you. So this is the overall site plan. There are a couple of graphics that get into the traffic circulation. The first one that I mentioned just now was about one of the comments that said whether there should be a channelizing island on this driveway coming out of the site that would force all traffic to turn right, because this is an unsignalized driveway. The signalized driveway would be farther to the north at the Marathon driveway. So this driveway would primarily serve right turning traffic. So that's really the traffic that would benefit from coming out of an unsignalized driveway. Anyone that wants to turn left could, and most likely will, after the first week or two, use this cross connection to use the Marathon driveway to make a left turn at a protected traffic signal control at the intersection of the Marathon driveway and Hayden Row Street. But I think our response would be that this restriction or the right turn should not be enforced with a physical island. It's more of a suggestion that parents should use the cross connection to make a left turn. There should be, a physical restriction here would essentially reduce the flexibility to modify the circulation in the future should we find a different circulation pattern works better for the actual operation. So that was the first point that I made earlier. But when we come down to the actual site layout and around the building, so traffic coming into the site, either coming off of Hayden Row Street or via the internal cross connection, would travel through the roundabout on the site, the new roundabout, and then drive past the wetland areas that Ashley mentioned earlier. And then once you get to this point right here in the bend in the road, that's a decision point. Parents would peel off and travel to the left of this area, and they would go down this driveway to go around clockwise the building. That would be the parent drop-off, whereas buses would continue to go around the bend and then turn around here at the front of the school and use the one-way loop, the counterclockwise loop that goes in front of the school. So those two movements are shown in this graphic in color. So the parent operation, once you get past this point, there is on-street parking or perpendicular parking along the driveway. So this section of the driveway would be two-way operation. But once you get past the parking, the rest of this loop driveway that goes around the school would be a one-way driveway for parent queuing, pickup and drop off operations.
So can I stop here?
Sure.
So the buses are going to queue where the blue dashed line is. The buses are going to be in queue in that location. How many buses can fit there?
So based on the number that Ashley mentioned earlier, this has been designed for 19 buses.
How many buses service the school?
I believe it's about 11, or it's two waves of 11, because they also service the Marathon School. And so there'll be a wave of buses that will come to the Charleswood School. And at the same time, there'll be a wave of buses that goes to the Marathon School. And then they will, when they've each loaded, they'll swap. A similar thing is done now with Marathon and Hopkins. So rather than having the buses continue down Hayden Row between Marathon and Hopkins, The buses will now circulate with Marathon and Charleswood, and it should actually reduce the overall number of buses that are in town, or bus
So-
stops that are in town.
Okay, so the buses, once they leave, they're gonna be trying to make a left turn with parents trying, like fundamentally, parents trying to go in front of them to basically to pick up their children at the back side of the school.
So
So-
the parents will, there's a couple of things here that I just want to highlight so it's clear, because the teams discussed this at length over the history of this job. There's a gate at the end of the proposed building. I don't know if you can highlight that, Vinod. There's one gate down at the bottom, and there's a gate up at the top, basically where that new highlighted addition is. And that would be closed during the day so that during school hours, these roads would serve as closed to the public so that we don't have safety concerns with the kids. The end of the school day, those gates would be opened, and so parents could queue up to those gates at the top of the plan and wait and begin to form the queue. By moving the gate back, that queue could form all the way down what would be staff parking. And I don't know, Vinod, if you have the number of cars that can fit in that length.
But I guess my question is, there could be parents queued all the way up, blocking the ability for a bus to leave.
That would have to be managed with striping, and it's not that different than what's going on in a lot of the other schools. Currently at Hopkins, it has a shared driveway that everybody comes into. The parents are diverted first. They do back up, but the road is wide enough so that they can back up, but the buses can still get by.
Hey,
There's
Chair. Wouldn't we drop like where the crosswalk is in the top left of the map? You zoom in, yeah, right there. Like we already know today, there's a crosswalk guard at like Marathon, for example, that's stopping parents from coming in to allow buses to go. So it's like could be reason to assume that there could be personnel to make sure that happens. But I see your point. I see what you're saying, how there could be a choke point, but I don't know. I feel like we could expect like somebody to be there potentially directing traffic.
Well, like as soon as like what that blue arrow is, the bus is gonna exit, hit the stop sign, go to the stop sign. And
they'll
then
come here.
then there's gonna be parents without any mitigation or any without some type of human control. And from my point of view, there potentially could be parents just queued in front of that intersection.
But we're assuming that they're queuing at the bottom, correct? And they're looping all the way around? Or
No, they're
oh, it's the
queuing
opposite way. Yeah,
they're
you're right. I
queuing
was looking at that wrong.
Yeah, they're queuing clockwise.
Right, and to the chair, I think you rightly pointed, that might be another choke point at the start of the bus, where the bus entry, and yeah, that's the way. There might be also challenging out there. So if the parents are leaving and the buses are coming across, this might be a choke point again.
Could I ask one other question? Where is the kids actually gonna be picked up in the back of the school? Like where is the like
Actually, do you have the specific location?
It's going to be the south, right there where you are, Vinod. So the intent is that they would gather in the cafeteria, which is to the south of the building, and load in that area. So the line of parents starts at that point and wraps around the back of the building.
So once the gates are open, once the gates are open from that point all the way to the staff parking, how many cars do you think can queue there?
So
The
this is
design-
Ashley. Vinod,
Go ahead,
I just
Ashley.
measured that number because I figured it would come up. So there's over 85 cars that can queue up. So if you see where my pink line was, sorry, I was doing a terrible job drawing that length. But if that's where we say the drop off is going to happen for the cars, you have over 85 cars are able to stack along before you get to kind of that intersection that we were discussing at first. So just
That's-
part of that parking lot up top, just past that orange line.
Ashley, is that the intersection at the end of the parking or the intersection at the Rotary?
And just the end of the parking, I'm not even counting the rotary. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So that's your endpoint. And then if you move that cursor straight up page north, yep, all the way around, keep going, 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 going. I would actually say that the queue is really going through this parking lot too. So I think all your conversations and these comments are really great. And we actually flipped this drop off multiple times. I think the reason we ended here is the ability to queue many more cars with this length and dropping off at the same point. The other thing that this allows us is the parent drop where the cars are actually dropping off. You're much more proximal, or you're pretty proximal to the building. So you actually have this drop off where kids are really exiting buses, cars at the same time.
The separation between buses and cars and how the stacking is being organized here is substantially better and more stacking here than what you'd currently observe at Elmwood. And one of the reasons was that, you know, one of the design criteria we made sure we used right on early on in the process was to make sure that there's enough stacking distance to be able to accommodate the long queues that Ashley is talking about. I mean, 85, I mean, if you 85 cars, even all of this area, this whole area can be stacked without any interference with the intersection out here. And the buses can come out and leave. So I think from a design perspective, this length of stacking is adequate to accommodate the needs for the school for the future projections 10 years out. That's the design criteria.
Is there any analysis of like the likelihood of a parent dropping off or picking up a child in this school versus say like the middle school, which is historically been 6th, 7th, and 8th? This school is going to be 2, 3, 4, or is that Hopkins? I'm confusing.
Rob, is your question is the likelihood that parents will have to pick up at multiple schools?
No, my question is like for every 10 students in middle school, maybe 1.5 parents picks up. In this school, is it 3 parent visits for every 10 kids? Is it higher or lower than like say the middle school? Because like I personally have just experienced that the last 3 years. So I know what that's like. So I'm trying to compare it to something I'm familiar with. Is the propensity parents pick up kids more at younger ages or less?
I don't know if anyone from the school would have an answer to that. We could certainly ask them that question.
I would answer that from a traffic study perspective, and I know the school staff that's here might have more specific answers to that question. But the way this traffic study has been prepared, we actually counted the number of vehicles at each of these schools, at Marathon, at Elmwood, at Hopkins, at the high school, the middle school. So these are based on actual counts. So you talk about, you know, is there a higher tendency for parents of students of a certain age to drive versus use other modes like bus or other modes of travel? That's already built into the data. The analysis is based on actual traffic counts prorated for the future enrollment projections that we have from the NSBA. So that metric is built in, but I don't have an exact number as, you know, 3 parents for every 10 students type of a metric, but it's built into the actual data that we observed at each of the schools.
Okay, one more question, and then I'll open up to the rest of the board if they have questions. So this is gonna, adding a traffic light at Marathon School is gonna basically now bring traffic lights at the center of town, at the traffic light right kind of in front of the exit from the middle school, traffic light at Marathon School, and then a traffic light at Chestnut Street, the intersection of Chestnut Street and Route 85. And there's going to be approximately 4,000 or so kids entering this area and exiting this area on a daily basis throughout the school year. I know you talked about the traffic signals being in kind of in coordination, or that's what the peer review consultant asked about. But what about like specifically for Marathon School, when it's not start of school or end of school, is the traffic light going to be active?
So
is it going to be active at like 8 o'clock at night?
the recommendation would be that it be active in the sense that it'll stay on green when there's nobody on the drive. There are sensors that are built into the driveways, so that there will be sensors that would detect if there is a vehicle leaving Marathon School driveway at, say, 3:15 or 2:45. The sensor would trigger the traffic controller, and that would change the light to green for the signal heads pointing towards Marathon School. But let's say at 7 p.m., if there's no one on the Marathon School driveway, the lights just stay on green for Hayden Row Street, just as if there was no signal. And the reason I would suggest that it be left on as opposed to put it on flashing or some other mode is that for the crosswalk to benefit, the proposed crosswalk across Hayden Row Street to benefit from the push button actuation. Currently, the two signals, the one at Grove Street by the middle school and the one at Chestnut Street, the distance between those two signals is just over a mile. So in that whole 1 mile stretch of road, currently you don't have a protected signalized crosswalk. You do have a flashing beacon controlled crosswalk, Marathon School. You have a couple of unsignalized crossing guard controlled crosswalks, but the only signalized crosswalks that you have in over a mile of a roadway corridor out there today is the one at Grove Street and the one at Chestnut Street. And what this design brings is a new traffic signalized crossing almost halfway in between those two signals. So it's about, it's probably a little bit closer to the Grove Street signal than Chestnut Street. But again, this signal would be the crossing, the protected crossing that's been missed for quite a while. And we've heard a lot of comments about the need for a safe pedestrian crossing along this section of Hayden Row Street. And this design brings that. And the only way you can have an actuated crosswalk with pedestrian indications working at any time of the day, whether it's school hours or not, is to actually have the signal operate, in a regular fashion, 24/7 in an actuated mode. But the expectation is that outside of the school hours, the signal would rarely get called, so it would stay green for Hayden Row Street north-south for the most part of the day, except during school hours.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Karen.
Thanks. Just a quick question, and I appreciate the explanation. But in terms of the crosswalk at that signal or at that light, I thought you had indicated earlier that there are no sidewalks there, right? So isn't that going to be kind of dangerous for people even crossing the street? Then they're just walking on the side of the road, especially if it's, adults are going to be bad enough, but heaven forbid it be kids. Is that true that there are no sidewalks there?
There are no sidewalks on the east side of Hayden Row Street. There's a sidewalk on the west side of Hayden Row Street, and then there's a sidewalk along the Marathon driveway.
No, can you go back to the last plan you had up, the overall? That way we can sort of highlight where the sidewalks are.
Thank you. That'd be helpful.
Yeah. So, and I apologize, the intersection itself is cut off here, but this is where the Marathon driveway intersects with Hayden Row Street. There's a sidewalk on the west side of the road that runs up and down the corridor on the west side. There is no sidewalk on the east side of Hayden Row Street through this area, but there is a sidewalk on the Marathon School driveway, and it does loop around the school property, and there is a connection to EMC Park. So there's always been, there was discussion about is there another alternative, a safer way for pedestrians to access, for example, the EMC Park via the gated access, as opposed to just walking along Hayden Row Street on the sidewalk and then crossing at a busy section without a protected crosswalk. And this crossing would provide that opportunity to access some of the amenities on the east side. But yes, there is no sidewalk on the east side of Hayden Row Street, as you pointed out.
But that sidewalk would feed into Marathon School, and we are proposing a sidewalk that would feed into Charleswood School, and we're proposing a sidewalk along the east side of the connector road between the two.
Okay.
So there'll be a sidewalk on this edge. There'll be a sidewalk on the south side of the new driveway that would wrap around and bring pedestrians to the Charleswood School as well.
And that would replace what are currently the rapid beacons that are at the Marathon driveway now.
That is correct.
All right. Does anyone else on the board have any other comments or questions? Jane, did you raise your?
Yeah, I was wondering if there is a sidewalk around the drop-off line.
For in the back, you mean?
Yes.
There's a sidewalk that runs.
Yes, Vinod, if I may, there's a sidewalk that runs the entire length of the drop off. So ample plaza space that you see in the front. And then also, you know, cars aren't promoted to be dropping off in the rear of the school. They should really be going up to the drop off where they'll have hopefully management of kids getting onto the cars. But there is a sidewalk that runs that whole length.
Right.
Okay.
Can
One more
actually see it
question
right
for
up.
the chair.
Yeah.
How
Go ahead.
wide is that driveway?
Michelle, do you mind confirming that? I believe it's 24 feet.
Hold on 1 second. Let me pull that up. Yes, the roads are 24.
Okay, thank you. So emergency vehicles would be able to, even if the cars were lined up, emergency vehicles could get around them.
Yes, that's the
Intent would-
intent. It's single
Sure.
stacking, so there'll be, you know, a whole side for emergency vehicles.
Thank you.
And also for bypass, generally, if someone in the back of the queue wanted to leave, they would not be stuck behind, 40 or 50 cars. That there's a way for them to leave safely.
And Ashley, do you have the queue length in feet that you measured that got you the 85
Yeah.
cars?
I think it was 17, don't quote, like 1,700.
So just for comparison, we just opened the revised queue at Hopkins for any parents who have been dropping off there. And the revised queue is about 300 feet, which is, I want to say about, probably, don't quote me on this, 150 feet longer than it was before. So we're significantly longer than what the queue that we just added at Hopkins is. And when Hopkins is done, it's going to be at 450 for just comparison's sake.
Yeah, so 1,700 feet is a really long car queue.
Go ahead. Lucia, go ahead.
I just wanted to get more information about the speed limits because I think there was some explanation as to not changing speed limits until after the school's open and some studies are done. So I just wanted clarification on that.
So again, the speed limit signs that you see on public ways, the white sign with the black lettering, it says speed limit 30 miles per hour, speed limit 40 miles per hour. That's governed by state law. And when an official speed limit sign needs to be changed, there needs to be done. There's actually a prescribed process that Mass DOT recommends that the applicant follow. One of the requirements is to actually measure the speed on the road and use that as a benchmark to understand what the speed of the road should be, or what the prevailing speed is on the road. So if you were to go out and measure the speed today, and if the complaint is that people are speeding through that corridor, the chances of being able to convince Mass DOT that the speed limit should be reduced for traffic calming purposes are slim. However, if we are able to implement some of the measures that we're talking about, traffic calming, the new traffic signal that meters the traffic between the two existing signals, the speed profile and the traffic patterns on the road are going to be different once Charleswood School is open and up and running. So a speed study done at that time with the new traffic pattern and all these measures in place would have better chance of for us to be able to make a better case to Mass DOT that the speed limit should be reduced through this corridor and not maintained at, for example, there are some 40 mile per hour speed limit sections on this section of Hayden Row Street. And the goal would be to help reduce that. And the chances are better if we did that after the improvements are in place.
And Vinod, just to emphasize that, it's not within the project's ability to change the speed limits on Hayden Row.
Okay, so through the chair, that means that then that driveway is gonna be 40 miles an hour.
I'm sorry.
Not the driveway.
No, I mean the road, like as you're coming out from the school or going into the school, you're going into 40-mile-an-hour traffic.
Rose Street, you mean?
Yes.
In Rose Street, it's part of the traffic study. I don't have that graphic, but it's a mishmash of speed limits. It varies from 20 miles per hour when flashing, the school zone speed limit, to 40. So there's a 20 mile per hour, I believe there's a 30 or 35, and then there's a 40. There are multiple speed limits in this section, and it does get quite confusing. Like every several hundred feet, you encounter a different speed sign. And the goal would be to make it all consistent and keep it at a speed that's reasonable for a road of this type. So it's not all 40 mile per hour, it varies.
And Vinod, we would recommend that we extend the school zone speed limit to include that driveway, correct?
Is correct. Yeah, this driveway with the crossing across Hayden Row Street that we would have would require that we change the school zone designation on Hayden Row Street to include this driveway within it. So the limits of the school zones would be shifted farther to the south to include this new driveway.
Okay, and through the chair, that's done after the school is open or before the school is open?
Or the speed zone designation, that can be done by the town as part of the school project. That's usually done through the Board of Selectmen. When there is a speed limit, school zone speed designation that needs to be implemented, that doesn't need to go to Mass DOT. That can be done by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris, did you or your team have any more to present tonight?
I think that was it. I think we wanted to just understand the feedback from the board, and if we can certainly try and answer some of the questions that were raised as part of the various discussions, but our goal would be to submit what we've presented formally for the peer reviewer to weigh in on, and additional supplementary information if there is any, to address any of the questions that were raised. And other than that, we'd look to come back to you at your next meeting, having given you enough time to review the formal submittal and hopefully begin to wrap this up pending our appearance before the design review board.
Okay. One last opportunity, going once, going twice, going three times on questions from the board. We're ready to move on for tonight.
Through the chair.
Go ahead, Lucia.
So I think my only other comment would be, it sounded like DPW and Hopkinton's Police Department were both in favor of the raised island for that no left turn driveway. So that's one of the things that I feel like we should consider, that if DPW, well, I think maybe DPW said we should plan ahead, that they don't necessarily know if that's what we should be doing, but that they think that having a no left turn sign is not going to do it, is kind of the gist of what I understood. So if we're not going to do that, then we need to have some other alternative option.
The chair, could I respond to that comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so again, the intent is not to force vehicles to make a right turn. I guess the intent of showing that right turn restriction on the driveways is to suggest that the best movement at that intersection would be a right turn only. Because a left turn at an unsignalized intersection, as you would have experienced along this corridor, is going to be relatively more difficult than making a right turn. So that's really the only reason why we were showing the right turn arrow with the no left turn sign. I mean, it's conceivable that you don't implement any restriction. The school will go through internal wayfinding signage and parent communications before the school year begins on the movements that parents need to make to travel in different directions. And I would say that within the first couple of weeks, parents will figure out the best movements that turns that they need to make at different intersections. And then we would come back with the traffic monitoring study after the fact. And if it makes sense to physically restrict that right turn, I'm saying that that's the time it would make sense to put in the island. Alternately, we might find that, allowing full access at that intersection still does not, make parents go there because they know that it's easier to go to the Marathon driveway to make a left turn at a signal. So why limit the future possibilities by building a physical island on the driveway when you still have the opportunity to put that in, 3 months after the school opens or 6 months after the school opens? I mean, we will be coming back to look at traffic in the future after the school goes in. And I would respectfully submit that that would be the time to consider those types of physical restrictions.
Just to kind of, my perspective is at the high school, they have a sign saying don't exit the main entrance to the high school between certain hours, and they direct you to like the loop road exit. That's like you enter on Hopkins, that's where you exit during school hours. I don't know. I'm envisioning something like that.
The only difference is that there is no signal at either of those intersections today, whereas here you would have a signalized left turn at the Marathon driveway. So that's really the primary difference here.
Okay. John, do I need to continue either the decision date or I need to continue the hearing, I guess?
Yes, you need to continue the hearing date. I was looking for the decision deadline. We need to extend the decision deadline for the stormwater management permit. The site plan is not, does not need to be extended.
And what's the date for we need to extend the stormwater management decision date?
We usually do it like a week or 10 days after the next meeting. So if we have the meeting on the 23rd, it would be October 2nd. I don't know what's the weekday in October. Let's see. October 2nd would be a Wednesday, so that would be fine. Or October 3rd.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the new Charleswood School to September 23rd for the major site plan review and stormwater management plan, and continue and extend the decision date for the stormwater management permit to October 2nd.
So moved.
Thanks, Vic. Thanks, Matthew. All right, roll call vote. Elise Mayalowski.
Yes.
Lucia Lopez.
Yes.
Matthew Ronca.
Yes.
Michael King.
Yes.
Parker Happ.
Yes.
Jane Moran.
Yes.
Karen Wills.
Yes.
Vikasath Prati.
Yes.
And Rob Benson is a yes. Thanks everybody. Thanks Chris and everybody for coming and giving us an update.
Thank you. Hopefully
Thank
we can get something to you
everyone.
and wrap this up next time.
All right, great. All right, next thing on our agenda is 0 Benson Street. We had a discussion about this at one of our prior meetings. Mr. Como, are you on the call? Donna, are you going to speak on behalf of Mr. Como?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Benson. How are you this evening?
I'm good.
Good. So I submitted a letter to the board at the end of last week, just I think highlighting what the concerns of the board are, which are number one, the completed gift to halt, and number two, the exceptional circumstances which the original plan were approved on. In my letter, I just highlighted that it's our position that the gift to halt was a completed gift. Halt did not need the land. Their proposed greenway never transpired. and Halt released us of that gift. So therefore reverting the lot back to us to be able to do what we wanted to do. That's the first item that I've addressed. The second item is the extenuating circumstances. Now we have a situation where the gift is not necessary. We gave money to Halt. And now Mr. Como and Mrs. Como have a lot that they've been paying on for a number of years as a buildable lot that they would like to use. And it's a burden. It's a burden. It is a hardship to them. And I think the board has to look at the extenuating circumstances of the hardship that this is going to have on them.
Does any member of the board have any questions for Mrs. Wolf? I'll just provide my feedback. I don't see it that way. I don't agree with your opinion on this matter. If anyone on the board does, they are welcome to come forward. That's my current way thinking.
So
there was an understanding that the land would be donated and then put in conservation restriction. It wasn't done. It should have been done. It doesn't make it now just, in my opinion, a buildable lot.
Well, it is a buildable lot. The town recognizes it as a buildable lot, Mr. Benson. They tax it as a buildable lot.
Maybe I misspoke, but it's not able to be built on right now because of that decision.
Through the chair.
And I think.
Go ahead, Parker.
Is conservation land taxable?
No.
Well, it's right now it's not.
So the applicant, if it was as intended, conservation land would have been taxed.
It wouldn't have been there. They wouldn't have owned it anymore, is the difference either.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Matthew.
So looking at the letter dated September 5th, it sounded like the applicant was looking at other land that they could have swapped out. So I'm wondering how that's going as a potential.
Certainly, I'll be glad to address that. We are talking to people. We are trying to find an alternative if the board is unwilling to, approve the plan as it is. But I think the bigger question, Mr. Ronka, is if we find this land, are you going to approve our plan? That's the question. And I think that's a legitimate thing that we need to address.
I don't think we can make a decision based off of a hypothetical,
Mhm.
and it's unrealistic to think we're going to provide that on a hypothetical.
All right, so we are trying to talk to a few people. We do have one piece of land that actually may abut current open space that the town has. But again, it's a financial discussion that the Comos have to make to be able to do this.
Okay. Jane, go ahead.
I would suggest if you're talking to other people about looking for some open space, that you actually talked to the chairman of the Open Space Conservation Commission. They have an active ongoing list of various properties throughout the town of various sizes and shapes that abut certain open space already. And that might be
that
a
they would be
quicker way to do it.
willing to discuss. We can certainly, my client would certainly look into that, but at this point, we have started the process to look into that.
Because it would have to be accepted through open space if that were the case, because they take on responsibilities of conservation restrictions as well.
Mhm. I understand that. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board or questions from the board? Mr. Antonellis, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. I just want to note for the record that my client appeared at the Hopkinton Town Hall on Friday to check to see if there had been any submissions. And as of Friday, the letter that's dated 9/5 was not available. I also did not find it available on the town's website this morning. That might be my lack of ability to find things. But if the letter was submitted on 9/5, my client did appear at the town hall on Friday, which is after that, and the letter was not in the file. So I would just make the point that those of the public that ordinarily have access to information were not given access to the information that Attorney Attorney Wolf has mentioned earlier. Secondly, I think that Attorney Wolf is making a very disingenuous argument about the hardship that Mr. and Mrs. Como have failed because they've been paying taxes on a billable lot every year. Note that Mr. Como testified to you that he forgot to record the deed. So I would think that the tax bill that must have come a year after the subdivision was approved should have served as a reminder to Mr. and Mrs. Como that they had previously agreed to donate the land to Halt. And by the way, not only did they agree to donate the land, the planning board at the time found specifically that the exceptional circumstances related to the waiver was the grant of the land. They found no other exceptional circumstances. There's nothing in the record that shows that the planning board relied on anything else to justify the extension of the cul-de-sac and waive the necessity of building the additional roadway. Again, I believe that there is a constructive trust on the property. I set that forth in my letter that was submitted at the beginning of this hearing. I have not wavered in that position. I don't think while Mr. and Mrs. Como have legal title to the property, they are benefiting the continued ownership of it by the fact that they failed, refused, or neglected. And again, perhaps they did just simply neglect or forget to do it. But the fact of the matter is that but forgetting to do something does not remove you of your responsibility to do that. I think the board can find another solution other than a land swap, which, by the way, my client relied on. That's part of what's important here. The people at the meeting, when this subdivision approved, relied on the promise that that land would stay as open space. And so what happens to those people that sat there and relied on promises for someone that got the benefit of building a home on property that otherwise could not have been built on? So I think the board needs to keep in mind what the original intention of Mr. and Mrs. Como was, and what the original reason, or what the fundamental reason that the prior planning board granted the approval. So I just want to reiterate that position, and I don't think that a substitution of land from another part in town satisfies the underlying circumstances, which were that the abutter relied on the promise of Mr. and Mrs. Como to leave open space next to their home. And had they not, had the board granted that approval at the time, perhaps my client would have appealed that decision. My client can no longer appeal that decision because the time is gone, and again, because he was satisfied that the board had imposed a condition that favored the neighborhood. And to simply disregard that condition at this point, we think is unjust to the other people in the neighborhood and provides unjust enrichment to those who forgot to do what they were supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Antonellis. John, can we help guide where our public documents are? They're in a Google Drive attached to our meeting minutes, our meeting notice.
So I think what Mr. Antonellis is referring to is the hard copy file. And this was emailed to me on Thursday. I work from home on Friday. It just didn't make it into the paper file. No one reached out to me. I would have sent this to your client if they had contacted me directly. I'm guessing nobody in the office knew that it was in my email because it was only sent to me in the chair. So that would explain that. Otherwise, I put it in the shared file, which is publicly available. You can access that through the memo that is attached to the calendar invite. It has a publicly accessible Google Drive folder, and I generally upload things to there as soon as possible, or at least before the planning board meeting.
Chairman Benson, do I have an opportunity to respond to Mr. Antonellis?
Sure.
Thank
Thanks, John, for giving that overview. Go ahead.
While I can appreciate Mr. Antonellis, I feel that the intent of the original decision was pretty flawed, and Mr. and Mrs. Como are paying for that flawed decision. The intent of HALT was not just this piece of land, but other land, and not thinking through the ramifications of if this greenway never got built, what happens to this piece of land? It just sits there. It's a 1.5 acre lot that isn't really going to be used for anything. I'm going to use your lovely project that you showed at the very beginning as an example of excellent use of land of HALT and open space. You have a solar array that would be unsightly, but with the benefit of the HALT land and open space, it protects it, it hides it. It's of true benefit to the town of Hopkinton. This one piece of land, which was supposed to be part of a larger parcel, is never going to happen. And to prevent Mr. and Mrs. Como from utilizing this land in something that would be very beneficial to the town, additional tax revenue, it would also be beneficial to the Comos. They would be able to generate some income for themselves as they get older. It is a good use of the property in the setting that it's in. That's all.
All right, Mr. Antonellis, then we're gonna
just briefly, I find it very interesting that Attorney Wolf, who was not at the original hearings, has found, if she's found something in the record that indicates that HALT was taking the land solely because they were going to add it to something else, then she's done a better job of researching the situation than anyone I know. And she has a better memory for what my client never heard at the meeting than my client does, who went to the meetings and still has original notes from it. So again, I think this statement to you that this was some kind of a mistake is simply an attempt, obviously, to gain approval for her clients, and that's her job. I understand that, but let's not kid ourselves. This was brought to the board on 2 occasions prior to the approval, and it was dismissed. The board wasn't interested in it. What happened was Mr. and Mrs. Como hired attorney Doug Resnick, and Doug Resnick came in and made a very good presentation to the board, and Mr. Haranis will compliment him on that, explaining that if you cut this piece off and left it as open space, it would provide open space for Mr. and Mrs. Haranis and other neighbors in there. And Mr. and Mrs. Como agreed to do that. And the benefit to them was a residential building lot in the town of Hopkinton for which they did not have to build a roadway. All they had to do was build a driveway. So I'm not quite certain where this other land that was going to be joined with and where that is all in the record, because I've never found it. And that's, thank you.
Well, Mr. Antonellis, I'll be glad to share that for you. I'll send an email to you tomorrow where that is in the minutes, where HALT describes this as the southeasterly corner of a proposed greenway. I'll be more than glad to send that to you in the record.
all right, we're gonna if you, Mrs. Wolf, if your client wants to pursue providing alternate land options, I think that is a reasonable pursuit. I don't think the board is ready to move forward on a hearing towards approving an amendment. John, do we continue this what do,
So the board can continue it, or I guess it's up to Attorney Wolf if they.
I would request a continuance, please.
So yeah, I would say continue to September 23rd, or did you want to go to a later date? How long do you think it would be to get an answer on the open space?
I think if we could do the 23rd, Mr. Gelsich, we'd like to give it a try, please.
and do I have to extend the decision date? John?
Yes, I'll make sure I'm looking at the right one. Too many pages. No, the decision is due October 23rd, so it should be all set.
All right, for the board, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for 0 Benson Road to September 23rd. Oh,
So moved.
Matthew, do you, for a second, Matthew,
yeah.
do you have a comment?
I just had a comment or question. If it sounds like the applicant's not going to be close to having something to talk about in terms of a land swap, I think we'd all appreciate having as much advance notice to that it's going to be continued, given the interest in the public.
Certainly.
In this hearing. Thank you.
We will make our best efforts, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So we have someone made the motion.
Who made that motion?
It's me, Vic.
Vic. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Matthew. All right, roll call vote. Elise Malowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Hap,
Yep.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes. All right, we're on to our final hearing of the night. Agenda item 4, continued public hearing for 37 East Street, New England Laborers Training Center.
So Rob,
Yeah.
they requested a continuation without any discussion. They, so yeah, so just a little background on the status of this one. We were waiting on the balance of the consultant review deposit from the applicant. They got it to us like last Thursday, so the consultant hadn't started their review yet. So they recognized that, requested a continuation since they knew there wasn't going to be any discussion tonight.
Okay. Do I need to, so we got to continue the public hearing. Do I need to move a decision date?
Yes, the stormwater management permit is set for September 17th, so we'd have to move it to October 2nd.
All right, I'd like to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for the major site plan and stormwater management permit for Laborers Training Center, 37 East Street, to September 23rd, and the decision date for the stormwater management permit till October 2nd.
Second.
Second.
Who was the first?
I think I was, John. Mike.
Thank you. And then Vic or Mike or Matthew?
Vic.
All right. Thank you.
Roll call vote. Elise Malowski,
Yes.
Lucia Lopez,
Yes.
Matthew Ronca,
Yes.
Michael King,
Yes.
Parker Hap,
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is a yes. We don't normally, I was wondering, John, is it within bounds to talk about like future agenda items?
You can mention which ones you want to talk about, but you can't actually like discuss them.
No, I was wondering, I wanted to ask the board if they had any future agenda items that
Yeah,
they
that's fine.
wanted, like, does anyone, because one thing I was, not that it's before our board, but what's before the zoning board of appeals might be worth us discussing as a board. I thought about that, but I didn't know if anybody else on the board had any future agenda items they'd like to discuss.
So the chair, is that, I mean, apart from what John sends us the agenda, this is as a board members, we can add an additional agenda?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Might be adding something regarding my street, but it would be in the capacity of a private citizen. I don't know if I can do that in the official capacity, so I'm not sure if that's relevant to the question you're asking.
I guess I was thinking it would be worthwhile to discuss maybe in the next meeting what the applicant is trying to do in front of the ZBA versus going the normal route to change zoning before the planning board. But other than that, I don't, that was one thing I was thinking about. Matthew, go ahead.
Some of the stuff that's in front of the Zach, I think there was a time concern about when we'd be discussing it. I'm not sure if it makes sense to discuss before we'd have to have a discussion on it anyway. So I'm just, that's part of my concern.
What are you, the MBTA?
No, I mean, I think the MBTA is the earlier that we're able to discuss that, the better, right? One of the concerns that was raised in the past was that there wasn't enough time for the public to really be involved. But there was when you're talking about stuff that's in front of Zach, I just want to make sure that we're.
No, I'm talking about what's in front of the ZBA. There's a.
Oh, I thought you said Zach.
Gas station.
There's an applicant looking for a use variance to put a gas station on a rural B district.
A district.
Rural A district.
Just a district.
A district, sorry.
I wonder what the benefit of discussing something in front of another board would be.
Also, Rob, to that point, if it does get a variance, they will be coming before the board for site plan and stormwater. So I don't know if the board would want to discuss that project before it's a potential application.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. I think I know the best route of what I want to get accomplished. Lucia, go ahead.
So one of the things that came up, one of the questions that came up for me in listening to Zach at their last meeting is if maybe it makes sense for the planning board to have a better idea of what open space is looking for when somebody is looking to donate land to them. And so I don't know if that's something that it would be good to hear from open space at one of our meetings or how we would go about doing that. But that was one of the questions that I had.
Okay. Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about some of the work that the board has done in the past also that we could resurface if we did have some open time. There were a number of sidewalks that we had planned. We could talk with DPW and other parts of town about improving connectivity again. There was a lot of discussion in the past about connecting between the two sides of town, for instance, past 495, and other areas that were identified that potentially could be of service. But
all right,
there's a lot we could talk about as a board without more research being done there.
I think for the most part, I just want to empower the board. If there's an agenda item you want added to the meeting, you can send an email to John, maybe CC me, and the agenda can be a collection of all of our best ideas. So we obviously have the things we have to do in terms of public hearings and all that, but we can carve out time to talk about things that would benefit the community. But for tonight, I think it's a great time for us to wrap up. So I'd love to entertain a motion to adjourn for this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Parker. Roll call vote. Elise Mayalowski.
Yes.
Lucia Lopez.
Yes.
Matthew Ronka.
Yes.
Michael King.
Yes.
Parker Happ.
Yes.
Jane Moran,
Yes.
Karen Wills,
Yes.
Vikasath Prati,
Yes.
and Rob Benson is yes. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.